Hey, Entrepinayship community. My name is Asia Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us in conversation. Today, I am talking with Kristina Rodulfo about changing beauty standards in Filipinx communities. As I said, my name is Asia Jackson. I am a Black and Filipino actress, activist, and content creator filmmaker based in Los Angeles. I am the founder of Magandang Morenex, which literally translates to beautiful brown skin, that I created 4 years ago in 2016 to challenge colorism and Eurocentric beauty standards in the Philippines and to celebrate the diversity of Filipino beauty. So I am joined today with Kristina. She is a journalist and beauty expert with a decade of experience in editorial. Currently, she is the beauty director of Women's Health Magazine, where she oversees beauty coverage across both print and online. Previously, she was at Elle Magazine on the digital team. As a senior beauty editor, she reported and co-produced the Webby Award-nominated documentary, Beat: How Drag Queens Shaped the Beauty Industry. P.S. I would love to watch that. That sounds really interesting. And she also hosted the millions-viewed video series Beauty Hall. She has also been a beauty editor at Pop Sugar, and her writing has appeared in InStyle, Harper's Bazaar, Into the Gloss, and Stylecaster. Before she landed on the beauty beat, she covered fashion, health, fitness, and entertainment. Kristina grew up in Queens, New York, and graduated from NYU. She's really proud of being a Filipino-American daughter of immigrants, and as someone who never saw herself reflected in magazines, always pushes for representation of women of color in the beauty and media industries. So thank you, Kristina, for joining me.
Thank you, Asia, for that really kind introduction. I'm so excited to be speaking with you because I love your work and everything that you stand for as well, and all of the knowledge that you share with people all over. So this is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So just so you guys know, Kristina and I actually met on a panel previous to this. So I'm like really glad that we were able to meet before this conversation. So
we're all pals now.
yeah. So Kristina, the first thing I want to talk about is like growing up Filipino as it relates to like beauty standards. So are you second generation?
My parents are immigrants, so I grew up and was born and raised in Queens, New York. I'm
Okay.
quite Americanized, in case that doesn't come across. But I grew up very close to the culture. I grew up in a very Filipino neighborhood, 3 blocks away from a Catholic church, so you would only expect as much. And every other home was a Filipino household. So I grew up around the culture, the food, learning the traditions, the dances, the OPM songs on karaoke. I had TFC on all the time in my house. So I grew up very connected to the culture.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. So like since you were in a community of like other Filipinos and you felt like really connected to the culture, what was it like growing up? Like how did growing up in a Filipino community in New York, like how did that shape your definition of beauty?
I think that it was heavily shaped by whatever is carried over from Philippines back home. A lot of the same ideals that my parents' generation would have grown up with were carried on. So, for example, nobody ever wanted to get too tan. I would see people walking around with umbrellas so that they don't have any sun exposure. And I naturally am, medium tan skin right now. I mean, because of the pandemic, I have not seen the sun. So I am lighter than I have ever been in my life, but usually I'm very tan. And I would always, hear titas being like, oh, be careful. Like, you don't want to get too dark, as if it was a bad thing, and I really absorbed that. I remember I visited the Philippines when I was a teenager, and my aunt, who I looked up to a lot, she gave me a 6-month supply of papaya soap to whiten my skin. And I was naive at the time, and I really believed, that having lighter skin meant that you were more beautiful, because that's also what I saw on TV and in media, in Filipino media. Every star that you would see on those variety shows or singers or actresses in movies, all I would see were light-skinned Filipino women, and a lot of times women who had ambiguous features. So usually they were half white or half Chinese or half something else. I've never seen someone who was like a full Filipina, and you could tell. So for me, I think what that translated to was a lot of internalized, I don't want to say hatred, but I think that there was an aversion rather to the natural beauty that I was born with. I think that it took a lot of learning history and doing a lot of research on myself, uh, on my own about colonialism and the impact that that had in our country and the way that we view beauty and the way that, I mean, in so many ways, but particularly in beauty and our ideas of how, you know, proximity to whiteness, proximity to Eurocentric features means beauty. I think that before I knew that, I believed the same things. So it took a lot of awakening by meeting other Filipino people who are in my age, like my generation, and kind of exchanging stories and realizing that, you know, the way that we are and like our heritage and the way that it shows in our face, whether it's like a round nose or a round face like I have, or darker skin, I think that it took me a long time to appreciate and love that for what it is.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, a lot of the work that I do is like specifically about skin color, like colorism, like
Yes.
that's what the hashtag
Mhm.
is about. But another thing that I wanted to talk to you about is like, what's your opinion or like, what are your thoughts on like featureism? So, we're talking about like the nose,
Mhm.
I one time saw like, there was a Filipino influencer who was on YouTube and she was like trying out this little gadget. I guess they were like plastic sticks that she put in her nose to like make it taller. And I remember when
Oh.
I was in the Philippines, like even though I was bullied for my skin color, one thing that I always got complimented on was my nose because it's like tall and pointy. Like it's
Mm.
such an interesting like multi-layered issue, I guess, because I was bullied for being dark, but then like my nose, like everyone liked it. So like what
Mm.
did you have any experience with like being told that like your specific features, like your nose or something was like considered not beautiful or that you needed to change it or anything?
Mhm. So thankfully, I never experienced that directly. I think because I grew up in such a diverse community in Queens, and it's one of the most diverse counties in all of the world, I think that there was just so much exposure to different types of beauty that, especially as kids, I didn't experience that because my classroom looked so different. There were Indian
Mhm.
people, there were Chinese people, there were white people, there were Black people. It was just like a mix. And in a way, I'm grateful for that because I think that I was like protected from feeling othered in that way. But I will say that I remember hearing a lot of talk about noses. In particular, cousins or titas or people, they just really loved this idea of like a straight nose, or a sloped nose like yours, or one that has like a prominent point to it, or a tall one. And no one ever wanted to have this like flat nose, which I guess would signify like, indigenous features, or kind of anything that looked mixed was always revered. And I think in men or women. And I never knew that that was problematic because I also then grew up wanting to aspire to those things, like wishing I could get a nose job. And I definitely would admit that I've had those moments, and it's very like deep rooted in the culture.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting how like um the community or like how specifically media can like influence or like the things that your family says to you, how can they can influence like decisions that you want to make about your appearance. It's so interesting. But
Completely.
yeah. So another question that I wanted to ask was like how does the Filipinx or like the Filipina identity resonate with you?
Oh man, how does it not? I think that I'm so proud of my heritage. I'm so proud of being Filipina. And, my parents specifically are from the Bicol region. So I'm Bicolana, and both of them are from Bicol. And I think that just that connection that I have to our culture is so strong, because I grew up in a Filipino community, and I grew up in, uh, a lot, like surrounded by a lot of Filipino friends who are my age. Like my close friend group, all of us are pretty much Filipino. And I think that the Filipino identity to me has evolved over time because for me, I think I had a superficial understanding of what it meant. Like for me, I used to think like, oh, just like being Filipina and calling yourself that was enough. But for me, understanding the history and like backstory of like what our societies were like, like matriarchal societies, and what our indigenous roots were like, and kind of like the power and community that Filipino culture like inherently has. Like there's this amazing bond that Filipino women have with each other that I feel like, is just so powerful. And I think it just like goes back to our ancestors, and just like the communities that we had, and the power that there was in this amazing, like hospitable, like wanting to like share, give, and like be selfless. I think that's always what I've personally experienced within my like Filipina like mother figures in my life, and I've always aspired to continue that.
Yeah, that's great because I know like at the beginning you said like calling yourself Filipino, you felt like it was enough, like as part of your identity. And I have actually had
Yeah.
a lot of conversation with a lot of Filipino Americans who had something similar to say, like they thought that, eating lumpia and like that was enough, you know what I mean? But then they
Oh
like get to
yeah.
college and they meet other Filipinos if they grew up in like a predominantly white community, and they get to college and meet other Filipinos and they learn about their history. And there's so much that you can learn about yourself just by learning about your history. So I'm really glad that you
Hmm.
brought that up because I have this
Yes.
thing that I say that it's like no history, no self, no
Hmm.
history, no self. So like when you know
Yeah.
your history, you have like a really strong sense of identity. So I love that.
I love, yeah, I mean, I totally stand by that. And I think that it's something that makes you special. Like I really, I feel like when I think about, moments of difficulty or moments where I feel like I'm under pressure or life is hard, I always think to like as recently as my mom, like, like what she went through, her strength, and how I can carry that on. It's like, we have an amazing lineage.
Yeah, I agree. So talking like going back to like the community that you grew up in, or like your home life, what messages did you get about beauty standards, or like messages about beauty inside the
Mhm.
home or in your community? Like what specific messages did you get? What like, and not only negative messages, but like positive ones as well, if there were any.
So specific messages that I would get definitely were all related to the idols at the time. So it's very pop culture influence. So whoever we were seeing on TV, whether it's like Heart Evangelista or Ann Curtis or, those like mega stars in the Philippines, I think that that's where all of the ideas of beauty came from here, because that's what we saw and that's what our parents saw. And, I just remember hearing conversations of titas and my mom being like, oh, so and so is so beautiful, like you look like so and so, or like they would always compare you to of course a pageant queen, right? Like they would always I remember watching Miss Universe growing up, and it was always like the Super Bowl for us with our Filipina, representatives, and like rooting for Miss Philippines, and it's very much like, a lot of the messaging was, beauty was of value. I think that, and this is still something that I'm unpacking to this day, but I think that a lot of what I learned was and internalized was that a lot of your value and worth and like what you have to give in the world rests on your beauty, and that you always have to be presentable and like pageant ready. Like I learned from a very early age how to do my makeup, how to uh, curl my hair, and I competed in like local Filipino-American pageants. I was very much a participant in that, and at the time didn't question it, because I just thought it was a part of our culture. But yeah, I would say that a lot of the messaging around beauty came from wanting to primp and be presentable in like a way that I would say is super conventional with what we see in Western culture too.
Mhm. Yeah, and I definitely think that like Hollywood has a huge impact on uh like the entertainment industry in the Philippines as well. I feel like a lot
Absolutely.
of like even now when you look at some of our like makeup trends in the Philippines right now,
Hmm.
a lot of it is very like based on Western like makeup trends. So like trends that
Uh-huh.
don't necessarily work on our features, but like people are doing them anyway. I thought that was really interesting to look
For
at.
sure. I mean, I definitely, when contouring was it, I would say like several years ago, people still do it. Makeup artists still do it. But when it was like the thing to do at the time, where everyone would have these like dark marks on their face just to show where you go contour, I definitely was all about that life, even if in a way it was kind of erasing what my natural features are, like trying to make my nose look more straight or trying to carve these cheekbones that I don't have. So, or like making my jawline more like sharp or something. I definitely have a love and appreciation for the artistry of makeup, but I think that there's also a place to be critical of the trends that happen and kind of try to understand where it's coming from.
For sure. Yeah. The beauty industry changes like every year. So it's like always interesting to see.
Every minute.
Yeah.
There's always something happening.
Yeah. So on the conversation of the beauty industry, so you are the beauty director at Women's Health?
That's correct.
Yeah. So I'm an influencer. So I'm sure you have like more insider information than I do. So like, what do you think, or what have you seen are the biggest impacts that COVID have had like on the beauty industry specifically?
I think that there's been a mass shedding of superficiality. I mean, I would like to put it that way. I think that for a long time, along with contouring and like heavy kind of Instagram beauty influencer type makeup, was very much the reigning like standard of what people, especially on social media, consider to be beautiful and aspirational, right? And now, because literally you have nowhere to go and I'm at home, I have no reason to wear makeup except to look pretty for you. I feel like what it has encouraged is everyone to kind of embrace their no makeup face a lot more. I've seen everyone get so much more into skincare. Even friends of mine who I never thought would get so into skincare start texting me questions about, vitamin C serums and things like that. Like everyone is using it as a moment to, there's a lot to be said about the commodification of self-care, but I think that there's a lot of value when it comes to taking time for yourself. And I feel like people are starting to use beauty tools and masks and those kinds of things in a way that is deeper than just wanting to have clear skin. It's so much more about like giving time to yourself. So that's a huge trend that I've seen this year, because people are so much more at home and grounded and not traveling as much or not seeing people as much. Everyone is looking inward a lot more.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you've just said, because like even for myself, like we're all staying at home, so we're not traveling, we're not as like busy, I guess. We're really like having time to like look like introspectively, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I've noticed is that, so I've always had like acne basically my entire life. And one thing,
Same.
yeah. And then one thing that I've noticed like since the pandemic has started was that when I stopped trying to eradicate acne and I started focusing on like the health of my skin just started clearing up, and it feels better. Like more importantly than does it look great, but like it feels great too. So I think that was a really interesting point that you brought up, and I totally agree with that for sure.
Well, your skin looks amazing. First of all, I know like we're on Zoom, but like you're glowing for real. Seriously. I'm like, woo, that's amazing. Bottle that up for me, please. But yeah, I actually did a report in Women's Health, our March issue, I talked a lot about my cystic acne that I experienced during a really difficult time in my life. And I wrote a lot about the connection between mind and skin and the connection between stress and acne. And a lot of people don't discuss this. They think that you can just put on a spot treatment and then a zit is going to go away. But there's actually a lot of, and I spoke to dermatologists, psychologists for this piece when I was reporting it. And there's a lot of evidence to say that your mind, your mindset, the psychological state that you're in can affect your skin. So for all of us being more at home and perhaps having time to slow down, or for people who are having a difficult time right now because of this pandemic, that stress, it can show on your skin, and it's definitely connected.
Yeah, I totally see the relation. Like I also have I have an anxiety disorder, and so when people are like, yeah, like the state of your skin's related to like if you're stressed, and I'm like, well, I'm stressed all the time.
I'm stressed all the time, so yeah. What am I gonna do with that?
Yeah. It's crazy. I love the conversations that we have about like mental health and how it relates to like beauty or like the way that we take care of
Mhm.
ourselves. I'm always like interested in that conversation. So I'd love to read that piece. If you have a moment to like send it over to me,
Of
I would love
course.
to read it.
Of course. Yeah, for me, that's my sweet spot when it comes to talking about beauty because you could think of beauty as something that's superficial and very like, frivolous, but to me, I think it's extremely powerful. Um, in a way that you can tell stories around it, like because you can talk about mental health and beauty and the way that like the beauty, however you define it, is like an armor that you put on for the world. And everyone, no matter who you are, when you wake up, you think about how you want to present yourself to the world. Like that's what I think that beauty is, and it I think it tells you a lot about what your culture is, what your identity is,
Mhm.
where you grew up. It reflects so much about who you are.
Yeah, especially when you think about like indigenous beauty practices, like
Mhm,
a lot
mhm,
of it is like a cultural practice. Like, sometimes like some indigenous communities like blacken their teeth and it's
mm,
like a whole ritual and like a practice. So I don't know, I think we often look at beauty as being something super superficial, but I feel like
mhm.
it can also be like a ritual or like like a practice as well. I think like the self-care practice is also like a huge part of it. So that was an
Sure.
interesting point. Yeah. So talking about like beauty, like beauty movements or like yeah, like beauty movements, for example, like Magandang Morenix, are there any like movements that you've like championed or like organizations that you have like been involved in or like any movements that you've been involved with as it like relates to beauty?
Sure. Yeah. Earlier this year, when the pandemic started, some of my friends within the beauty industry and I started something called Donate Beauty. And what we did is we facilitated, hundreds of thousands of donations of personal care products to frontline workers at the height of, when they were fighting this pandemic that is still going on right now. But at the time, it was kind of a place of uncertainty. Like no one knew what was happening. It was March, it was April. We are like, are we in lockdown? Are we our case is climbing. And I have so many friends who, are in the medical field. My mom is a nurse, which you maybe would have guessed considering I'm Filipino. So in America, in New York City, and my mom immigrated in the 80s, like you would guess she's a nurse. So she and her coworkers and my friends and their coworkers were dealing with such an influx of people coming in, and it was stressful and scary, and they were all working so hard and having to deal with a lot of PPE and extra sanitizing practices that really took a toll on their hands and their skin, and the masks that they were layering and the shields and that they had to wear would create breakouts on their foreheads, on their chin and cheek, and it's kind of like it's necessary to protect yourself and to protect others, but at the end of the day you couldn't escape from this reminder of the difficulty that you face that day, because you'd be breaking out or skin would be dry, chapped. Sometimes people would even get bruises from the
Mhm.
pressure of the mask being on for 12 hours of the day. So I was like, I really wanted to find a way to help, and with my access and connections within the beauty industry, I helped gather a bunch of brands to donate product to these frontline workers all over the country. We were based in the US, and so it blew up. It was kind of insane how fast word of mouth spread. And I have to say that like a lot of that was Filipino people in the Filipino community, because we're so highly represented in the medical fields. And I feel like even though it wasn't specifically like a Filipino initiative, to me, it still very much felt like one, because I felt like those were like my brothers and sisters in the hospitals, like on the front lines. And the least that I could do is offer a little bit of relief, a reprieve from the day by like having a nice hand cream after you wash your hands for the 500th time that day, and it was just another example of how beauty can be more than just like looking pretty. It's also a moment to take care of yourself too, especially if you're somebody who's taking care of so many other people.
Yeah, and like as you were talking about before, it like the movement that you created yourself, like that is beauty is community. Like you were literally gathering like a community of brands and like taking care of people who were taking care of people. So I love that. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we've been definitely on a hiatus just because we all have full-time jobs, and it became a full-time job. And thankfully, as time went on, people have been, at least from my friends that I've spoken to, hopefully it doesn't change, but like that people have been given more resources, that there wasn't as much of a crazy chaotic energy to everything that was happening. Obviously, the pandemic is still very real right now. And if there's a need, I would be happy to take it up again. But for the moment that it was, I'm extremely proud of it.
Well, I'm proud of it too.
Thank you.
So just to close up this talk, I wanted to ask you a few questions, a few additional questions. Is
Sure.
there any advice that you have to anyone that's interested in building a movement that they care about?
Right. So I think that the number one thing is you have to connect with your why. At the core of everything that you do, you have to go back and ask yourself, why is this important to me? Why am I doing this? Who am I serving? Are you thinking specifically, whether it's specifically for the Filipino community in America or in the Philippines, or specifically, the beauty community, or something like that? You want to think, who are you trying to help? And every decision that you make, from whatever marketing materials you might want to have, because movements need marketing, and whatever network you want to build or anything, you have to always think about, why are you doing this? And it sounds so simple, but it's so easy, and I experience this, to get caught up in all like the details of the day-to-day admin, and like and get frustrated at like spreadsheets and all those kinds of things that are necessary, or content planning, or things like that. And I think that if you are connected like truly and authentically to your purpose and the movement that you're trying to lead, then it will come out all right. You just gotta dive in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I totally agree with that. Like sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in, like you said, the details. You totally forget why you even started this in the first place. So you get like frustrated, or maybe you have like negative feelings or emotions, but then you have to like step back and be like, okay, but this is helping people. Like this is why I wanted to
Yes.
start it. I have a personal connection to it. Because I remember when I started hashtag Magandang Morenex, I really wanted to I created it in October, which is Filipino-American History Month back in
Yeah.
2016. And I wanted to find a way to celebrate the month, because it was it's a new month. Like it was only
Hmm.
like created in 2009, I think,
Hmm.
under the Obama administration. And so a lot of Filipino Americans didn't know about it yet. So I was like,
Yeah.
how can I get like this community involved in something and like to celebrate something? And I always, thought back to when I was bullied in the Philippines, like, because I used to live and go to school there. I always thought about how I was bullied for having darker skin. And, like you said, you always have aunties being like, oh, don't play outside, like you're going to get dark. And so I knew that this was like an issue that a lot of people, a lot of Filipinos experience worldwide, like all over the world, not just in the Philippines. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to find a way to like get people to like challenge colorism, like challenge that type of thinking, and to like celebrate the diversity of beauty. Because like Filipinos come in so many different shades. Like we don't all look the same. Like we come in different
Yes.
colors. It's a
This is like such a huge, I'm sorry to
oh
interrupt,
no
but like
problem.
this is such a huge misconception, especially because of like who is spotlighted in Filipino media.
Mhm.
It's a very singular idea of what a Filipino looks like, and
Yeah.
it's not true of everyone in the country.
Exactly. Yeah. Like a lot of people don't realize this, but we're like a multi-ethnic, multi-racial society, but you just
Yeah.
don't see it in media. So like people don't know.
Exactly. And that's why like movements like yours are so important. I feel like I remember, I think I actually remember coming across it when it, like in 2016, I remember, before I knew you. So this is crazy. The internet's wild. But I remember coming across it and I was like, this is genius. It's like not enough people are talking about this. And that's something else I would add, that like, if you feel passionately about something and you're like, oh, but maybe I'm the only one, or, like, you are not the only one. This is the
Mhm.
internet. This is like 2020. You are not alone. People will respond to you if you're authentic.
Yeah, sometimes just speaking authentically about your own experience will really resonate with people because that's exactly what happened with this hashtag. I had no idea it would blow up in this way. I was literally just speaking authentically about what I experienced, and like a lot of people resonated with that. So, um like going back to like connecting to your purpose, when I started this hashtag, there were a lot of people that were, I guess, like being like just opposing it like on purpose, like just finding a
Oh.
way to like say, oh, colorism doesn't exist, like saying all this stuff. And it would
Mhm.
get me really frustrated. And I remember one year I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do Magandang Morenix because I don't want to deal with like all of the haters or whatever. Like I don't want to
Mhm.
deal with the
Mhm.
arguments. But then I had to like take a step back and think again about my why, like my purpose. And then that's why I started it up again. So I think that's a really, really important piece of advice that you gave, because whenever you connect to your why, that will get you to where you need to go for sure.
Yeah, and it's very lonely sometimes when you believe in a cause, and if you don't have like the power of an extensive team, or it's just you by yourself or you and one other person, it can be really discouraging. So you need to have like a really strong fire under you,
Yeah,
otherwise you will burn out.
right. Yeah. So another question that I had for you, Christina, is why is conscious leadership important, especially right now?
Conscious leadership, I think that it's really important because you have to do it for more than yourself. And I think that people get caught up in this idea of leadership, of being a hero. Like, people want to be looked up to, they want to be admired. There's a lot of ego that
Hmm.
goes into leadership, like pursuing leadership positions. And whether you're in the media industry like I'm in, or you're in entertainment like you are, and acting, like, I feel like when people want to be a leader, sometimes they mistake wanting to be a leader for wanting to be the star,
Mm.
wanting to be the star of the show. And I think you have to like completely let go of that idea. And the idea of conscious leadership is thinking of the bigger picture that's bigger than yourself, and like your personal goals, and thinking about the larger community that you're trying to serve. So, definitely take stock of like intersectionality. Is there anyone who's missing from your movement, your conversation? Is there a voice that you know are ignoring, maybe like consciously or unconsciously? You really have to face the things that maybe you don't know, and you also need to um, acknowledge what your strengths are, and where you maybe need to outsource and go to someone else who's an expert. Like, as a leader, you need to be conscious of what you can offer yourself. Like, what are your unique skills that would help your movement or your company or your business or anything like that, as opposed to you wanting to do everything. Because
Right.
I think that a lot of, especially like type A personalities, or if you are into astrology, Leos, I'm a Leo, I'm a quadruple Leo, like
Oh my
four
gosh.
planets. I got 4 planets in Leo, which, if you know anything about astrology, means
Amazing.
I I can sometimes have a lot of ego, and I will admit that, but it's all about just like coming back to, again, what your why is, the community that you're trying to serve, and just like being conscious about serving. Like, I think that like when you're a leader, you're serving. You're not like someone who's just, again, the star of the show, or you have to be a coach for other people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I also think part of being a conscious leader is like being conscious of like the privileges that you do have. Because,
Yes.
I know like for me, as I'm talking about colorism in Asian communities, I also have to be conscious that in Black communities, I actually benefit from colorism because I'm considered light skinned in Black communities. So I think
Hmm.
conscious leadership is also like, and that takes a lot of releasing of ego to be conscious of the privileges that you do have. So I think that is a really important point that you brought up as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone has their blind spots, and I think that the more self aware you are, the better you can be for others.
Totally agree. So, Kristina, how can people find and participate in the movement that you created to Donated Beauty?
Yeah, so you can find me at Kristina Rodulfo, and you can find Donate Beauty at Donate Beauty. I'm very active on my Instagram, so you can DM me anytime. Literally, just slide into the DMs.
All right, and you guys can also find me at Asian. The joke is that my name is Asia and my Asian mother named me Asian, so that's like the whole joke about my Instagram at. So Asian.
I've always wondered that. I was like, oh, I wonder what the name came from.
It's like a play on like my background and my name. So you guys can find hashtag Magandang Morenex by typing in hashtag Magandang Morenex on Instagram or Twitter. And there are thousands of posts of brown skinned Filipinos who have been sharing their experience with colorism. So I would love if you guys could like go through the hashtag and kind of show support, like and retweet if you can, comment some like words of affirmation, and also check out Donate Beauty at Donate Beauty. So thank you so much, Kristina, for joining me in conversation. I love this conversation that we had.
Me too. This was amazing. You have been amazing. I really admire you, and I loved our conversation too. I feel like we hit on a lot of amazing points.
Yeah, for sure. We should definitely do one of these again.
We'll make it a weekly show.
Like a podcast. All right.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.